Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, the deadly cost of Latin American soybean production. We have a report. In Uganda, a new fuel briquette improves health and saves trees. We'll see how. And veteran filmmaker Chris Palmer wants to reform the wildlife film industry. He tells Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson why. The horror of soybean production in Latin America. Soybeans are a business that kills, destroys lives and health. UK-based Ecologist TV travels to Paraguay to find out who is responsible.
There is an unreported conflict raging across Latin America.
Eu acho que nós, índio Kaiowá, nós vamos morrer tudo. Nossa raça vai terminar aqui.
Y hay muchos casos de alergia, hay casos de contaminación, hay casos donde mueren animales, mueren personas, o sea...
Nosotros no somos protegidos. El poder es la plata.
These problems have been caused by the controversial spread of soy production, a large part of which is grown to feed factory-farmed animals in Europe, and much of it genetically modified. In a groundbreaking investigation, this film reveals the true cost of growing soy in South America. In Paraguay alone, over 2.6 million hectares of land are used to grow soya, and the effect of this on local communities has been devastating.
Anteriormente vivíamos los indígenas del monte, de todos los montes, los bichos, los frutas y esto, y ahora termina porque ya ve usted que acá ya nos rodea ya estancia. Y esa es una invasión, en vez de reforestar, ellos vienen a fundir la cosa natural como a estos bosques. Este es el principal arroyo que cruza aquí en nuestra comunidad. Este se llama arroyo Sauyú. Y acá cuando venena ahí, vino todo lo veneno cuando llueve. Y este está podrido, este agua, a través de estas plantaciones de soja.
Most of the soya grown in Latin America is exported to Europe and Asia. Much of it is genetically modified and produced by the biotechnology multinational Monsanto. Contrary to the claims of companies that produce genetically modified crops, strong evidence now shows a massive increase in the use of pesticides with the planting of these crops. Getúlio de Oliveira is a member of the Kaiowá people.
Então, com o veneno de estragar cada vez mais forte, veneno cada vez mais dificuldade. Então, isso é nosso sofrimento aqui. E não tem como pra gente também, a mata também, que protege o nosso solo também, né? Não tem mais mata, tem só... Não tem onde a água cada vez vai sumindo, né? Se não tem nada, a criança passa mal, a criança sente fome. Tem tempo de sem comida, né? E onde o pai, a mãe, a gente vai na cidade procurar o recurso, ele fala, não, a Índia está procurando lixo para comer. Não é isso que nós pensamos, nós estamos procurando comida. E eles falam, aquele que tem, eles falam que nós estamos procurando lixo ainda. Não é, talvez, como não tem espaço mesmo, nós não podemos fazer nada.
Experts claim that the rapid spread of soya farming has given rise to a new breed of brutal and intimidatory tactics by the soy industry.
La expulsión campesina se da por varios mecanismos. Un mecanismo es la compra directa de la tierra, otra es el alquiler, otra es el amedrentamiento a través de la contratación de matones armados. Cuando una comunidad se resiste a vender su tierra, o cuando una familia, peor aún, se resiste a vender su tierra, Todos sus alrededores son fumigados, ya sea con el glifosato, el Roundup, o con el Paraquat.
These chemicals are increasingly being linked to a host of health problems, including skin rashes, diarrhea, vomiting, genetic malformations, loss of sight, and even death.
Se estima que son aproximadamente unos 20 millones de litros de agrotóxicos potentes que son arrojados en la región oriental del país cada año, 20 millones de litros, con la consiguiente contaminación de todo lo que encuentre, la muerte de fauna y flora local, nativa, abejas, animales domésticos, cultivos de autoconsumo se ven afectados por el herbicida, y todo esto va atentando contra la posibilidad de arraigo que pueda tener una familia en esas comunidades.
Petrona Villas-Boas knows the dangers of living close to soya farms all too well. In 2003, her son, Silvino Talavera, was sprayed with chemicals as he cycled back from the village.
Después vino el doctor, 8:30 por ahí, y miraba a Silvino y le dije, señora, ¿qué pasó en su hijo? Su hijo está totalmente envenenado, su hijo totalmente tenía un tóxico altamente peligroso. Ahí yo ya metí mi cabeza y lloraba, desesperada ahí, y ya no podía caminar más, ¿verdad? Y grande es mi hijo. Y después, ¿qué pasó? Mi hijo está totalmente paralizado ya. Y a las 3 ya Silvino ya murió, ya no podía.
The Supreme Court in Paraguay sentenced the two farmers to 2 years in jail for the death of Silvino. But community workers say that they are unlikely to serve their sentence. Almost all of the soya grown in Latin America is controlled by a handful of multinational companies such as Monsanto, Bunge, ADM, and Cargill. Even as hunger and food insecurity rises, these companies are making ever-increasing profits with the sale of patented seeds, pesticides, and fertilizers. Much of the soy is sent to Europe, where it's used as a cheap and protein-rich animal feed in factory farms across the continent. The widespread deforestation of Latin America to feed European farm animals has huge implications for climate change as well. Global meat and dairy production is now responsible for 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions, more than the entire transport sector. There is a solution, however, and it is much closer to home. Hanny van Beek is a farmer and the chairman of the Dutch Arable Farming Union in the Netherlands.
Op dit moment is het zo dat de soja die naar Europa wordt geïmporteerd, die is zo goedkoop dat Europese boeren daar niet tegen kunnen concurreren. Dat komt omdat die productie ten koste gaat van het milieu en van de mensen in Zuid-Amerika.
Europe must stop its reliance on damaging soy. It must support farming in South America that produces food for its own people rather than for animals in Europe. European producers should also be encouraged to farm in a way that does not damage the environment and communities overseas.
Als alternatief voor soja in veevoer zouden we in Europa heel goed erwten, veldbonen, granen, lupine kunnen telen, ook grasklaver.
Better food in farming is possible, but we need urgent political action to change the current system.
At the moment, factory farming of meat and dairy in Europe is not benefiting people or the environment. We need to stop factory farming our meat and dairy and use homegrown feeds and more extensive farming. The only way that this can be done is to completely overhaul the way the government supports agriculture in Europe, to shift subsidies away from factory farming and towards better quality farming.
A new fuel briquette is reducing deforestation and saving lives in Uganda. Rockhopper TV, a production company based in the United Kingdom, looked into the story and filed this report.
In Uganda's capital city, Kampala, almost everyone uses firewood or charcoal for cooking. Tons of it is used every day in businesses, institutions and homes. The impact it's having on the surrounding countryside is clear to see.
All this area you can see was covered with trees, and as you can see from the far end here, all this has been cut down, and we have a fear the desert might come to Uganda.
Abasi Musisi owns a coffee roasting business. Keen to find a cheap and sustainable fuel, he came up with a very practical idea. Fuel briquettes made from sawdust and agricultural waste.
We had a lot of sawdust from the furniture workshops around Kampala. They had a problem of taking that one away. They were paying some people to take it away. And even for the agricultural wastes, they were being burnt, and that was a hazard also. So when I considered all those aspects, I said no, something must be done.
Today, Musisi pays carpenters and farmers for their waste products. Sawdust, rice husks and nutshells are just some of the many materials he buys. The material is sieved and then dried before being mixed together to make the perfect briquette.
Each material has a different characteristic. We mix them together like a baker makes a good cake. We do the blending just for one reason, to have a standard briquette. With the firewood, you have different species of wood. But with our briquette, it is standard. We'll give you the same firing today, tomorrow, and the day after.
The mixture is fed into one of two briquetting machines. They compact the material into convenient blocks. Musisi was soon producing more briquettes than he needed, so he started persuading other institutions and businesses around Kampala to install efficient stoves to burn briquettes. One of the first to try them was a local confectionery company.
We first built one stove just for a trial and worked out. This is a great idea because when I look at the composition of the briquettes, these are waste materials and we are rich in waste materials. I don't see any reason why we should continue using, cutting our firewood and so on.
Not only are the briquettes helping to save the forest, but they could also save lives. Smoke is a major cause of respiratory disease, and the briquettes produce hardly any. That's good news for the cooks that spend all day in the kitchen.
When we were using charcoal, the fumes used to make us cough, and many times we would end up ill. But ever since we switched to briquettes, we haven't had any trouble because there's no smoke giving off. We no longer feel sick the way we used to.
Several school kitchens also use briquettes. This one caters for over 3,000 pupils every day.
Before we used to use charcoal. Really, we could prepare food and it takes a lot of time. But this time, 11:30, food is already been served. So that's how we have now really known that really these briquettes are really faster.
The briquettes are also much cleaner to use. They're easy to store and they don't need to be chopped up. And the new stoves ensure that most of the heat stays where it should.
It used to be very hot. Ever since we started using the briquettes, with their briquette stoves, the heat reduced. So you find that the heat is just like you are just in normal rooms like you're in the office. So you just enjoy preparing food.
The word is spreading. Kampala Jellytone now supplies briquettes for over 1,000 stoves across the city. And it's not just big businesses and institutions that can benefit. It could transform the lives of thousands of people who still burn firewood at home. Kampala Jellytone are now working to develop an efficient domestic briquette burning stove.
It is my prayer that we may continue to use them long into the future because they have been a great help. I have nothing but praise for briquettes. They are 100% excellent. 100%.
Wildlife films offer a visual and dynamic connection to the natural world. Today, as the threat to wildlife is greater than ever, the market for animal films is exploding. Filmmakers face ethical questions like, can you show the lives of wild animals without fudging the truth? And do you exploit wild animals to thrill audiences, keeping ratings and profits high? Veteran wildlife filmmaker Chris Palmer is calling for a reform of his industry. Chris Palmer goes a long way to make a film. He's gone eye to eye with wolves, bears, and whales for 25 years to produce more than 300 hours of programming for channels like Disney and Animal Planet, as well as for the IMAX giant screen. He is the founder of the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University in Washington, D.C., where he is both on the faculty and a distinguished film producer in residence. Palmer speaks about his new book, Shooting in the Wild, with Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson.
Chris Palmer, you're one of the real pioneers. You started out almost a quarter century ago making films and videos of wildlife. Why'd you get into that? How'd you get into it? And what were you trying to tell people?
I got into it, Miles, because I was concerned about the state of the environment. I worked for the National Audubon Society, and I was worried that we weren't doing enough. We were very focused then on Audubon magazine. That was our vehicle for reaching people. And back in 1981, I said to myself, well, wait a minute, we have to do more than this. We have to get into television. Our goal was to promote conservation in a responsible way, not to produce propaganda, to show all sides, but to produce programs that would ultimately encourage conservation and the wise use of resources.
Now, you've written a book now that's called Shooting in the Wild, an insider's account of movie making in the animal kingdom.
Right.
You telling us some secrets in this book?
I am. A lot of the time, these films are made with captive animals, with controlled animals, animals that had been tamed. These animals don't always behave the way that real wild animals behave. They have sometimes been mistreated, held in game farms where they are taken out of and put in areas to make them look like wild animals.
Why do they do that? Why do the filmmakers do that?
Television is a money game. Ratings and branding dominate. Television is a business about delivering demographically desirable segments of the audience to advertisers. This means that networks are under incredible pressure to deliver exciting footage. But it is very expensive to go out and film animals completely naturally. It takes months. You know, finding a blue whale in the ocean is hard. Finding a wolf, a wild wolf in the Yukon is hard. It takes weeks. And this means that the people like myself who make films for these networks are under incredible pressure to produce dramatic films with little money in short time frames. That pushes us to do things that in retrospect we might regret and be embarrassed about.
Among your films was one about bears. Let's take a look.
Alaska has over 30,000 brown bears, one of the highest populations in the world. And that's exactly why Chris Day has made it her home. Chris's extensive experience with the bears of this area has allowed her to watch them safely at close range. Over the years, they've become accustomed to her, and Chris has given them names to help identify them.
Solstice is a 10-year-old female that I've known since she was just a cub. I was afraid our relationship would change when she had her own cubs, but it hasn't. From the very beginning, I've been lucky enough to watch them grow up too. In Alaska, cubs usually stay with their mother for 2 to 3 years before they go out on their own. Last spring, when they were only 6 months old, I could already see the differences between them. One cub was pretty timid and stayed close to Mom. The other was much more adventurous, a lot like Solstice when she was a cub. the years I've spent with the bears, watching them fight, play, raising their young, I felt a lot of emotions, but I've never felt afraid. I've never once felt threatened by a bear.
Does that particular film contain any examples of things you used to do you wouldn't do anymore?
It does. For example, when we see that picture of that woman, her name is Chris Day, she looks quite close. Now, it's slightly distorted because we're using a telescopic lens, but she is close. So that's one problem, is we are exhibiting behavior in the film that other people might copy. Because if young people see Chris Day getting close to wild bears, they will naturally say to themselves, oh, I'd like to do that. That is dangerous. It's not good for the bears. You habituate them, you get them used to humans, and you yourself may not mean them any harm. But the next person they see may be a hunter who does mean them harm. The other thing about this segment you've just shown from bears is that there's a sudden change in ecosystem. We hope the viewers didn't notice, and they probably didn't. But we went from Alaska to a different ecosystem. Why? Because in that second ecosystem, we used captive bears. We didn't tell the audience. The audience thinks they're wild bears. But you can never get footage like we showed there, up close with wild bears. It wouldn't be responsible, wouldn't be safe.
But the truth about animals isn't always exciting. Isn't always going to draw an audience.
Right.
A lot of their life might be considered dull.
Well, you're absolutely right. If you look at a lion, I think 80%, 85, maybe even 90% of the time of a lion is spent just doing nothing. You know, but that doesn't make good television. That is dull. I mean, so we've got a conflict here between the natural world with its beauty and slow rhythms and television with its rapacious greed for action.
You also made a film about whales. Let's take a look.
On occasion, members of Payne's scientific team must approach near enough to check the general health of an individual whale by close inspection of its skin. Though the diver is here to observe the whale, her subject seems just as interested in her. Observing whales in their habitat can be dangerous. A blow from a fluke that weighs a ton could easily render a diver unconscious.
What was there in that scene in particular you should tell us about?
A young woman called Kim gets into the water with right whales. Now, we hear the voiceover saying that sometimes Roger Payne needs to send scientists into the water to inspect the skin of whales to see that they're healthy. This is a lie. That whole footage you just seen was driven by the film, not driven by science. We wanted to have a picture of a young woman swimming with right whales. So what do? We don't tell the audience this. We went down and we put sounds of right whales in the water. We emitted them with a sound transmitter. in order to draw them in, just like a hunter would use the bird sounds to bring in a bird so he could kill it. Why? Why do we do this? Because we were desperate. We had 1 day left, money was running out, we hadn't got the shot, we wanted the shot, we knew it would be a powerful shot, our goal was to produce a program, a film that would knock people's socks off. By the way, let me point out just very quickly a very good thing here, a good thing, because there's lots of good things about wildlife filming. I don't want to sound too negative, it's just, but we filmed these whales from up high on a cliff, which is good. That's good to film in a way that you don't interfere with the animals. I'll see a lot of the filmmaking that goes on actually interferes with the animals' behavior. You have to get close. The animals know you're there, so it impacts their behavior.
What recommendations would you have for the future?
Well, my book, Shooting in the Wild, ends up with a plan for reforming the wildlife film industry. And so what I recommend, Miles, is that we produce films that are more entertaining, because if we don't, we're not going to win an audience. So using drama and humor and things like this, very, very important. Also, I recommend that we make films that don't harm animals. We become much more conscious of the impact of filmmaking on the harassment of wildlife. We need to use new media to create campaigns around these films to achieve changes in behavior and in public policy. We also need to be more green in our filmmaking. You know, when we go out filmmaking, we need to not leave garbage around. We need to clean up. We shouldn't be, taking bottled water on location. We should be, and so on. We got to walk the talk. So those are some of the recommendations.
Chris Palmer, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Mars. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.